This shot right here is one of the first to make me say, how in the world did he do that? I know the answer now, but the way Alfonso Cuaron moves the camera in Prisoner of Azkaban was almost hypnotic to me at the time. I started this channel to talk about directors and highlight some of their craft's less noted parts. While we all know Cuaron loves free-floating camera movement and soft editing pace, there's more to these decisions than what's just on the surface. Today, I want to take 3 films by Cuaron and discuss what exactly the motion the camera brings to his work. Cinematography is a massive part of film's language, so what exactly is Cuaron saying to us? Okay, let's start with the big one. How do you summarize the themes of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban in just one sentence? It's not easy, right? There are conversations about detachment, loss, grief, and letting go that build the movie's foundations, but that's not actually a sentence. So how about this one? Prisoner of Azkaban is about Harry confronting the parts of his past he had no control over and learning to let go and move on. Alright, that's not perfect, but let's run with it. Now, what does the camera do to connect us to the story and this summarized theme? Through staging and tracking shot, it often manages to isolate Harry and even loom over events like a passive observer. Moreover, I think the camera signifies something even more remarkable. The camera moves fluid, like time, a considerable aspect of this story. Okay, so I'm reading a lot into it. Yes, sometimes the scene is shot the way it is for simple aesthetic reasons. Still, Cuaron isn't that careless with his directing. Everything holds some sort of intention behind it. I see the camera in Prisoner of Azkaban in conflict with its environment. Often the camera bounces between 2 states of being. It takes on personas like the bird in flight during the Whomping Willow transition scene, or looms over Harry like a Dementor in this crucial moment. More often than not though, we're here for Harry Potter and the camera is most interested in him. We track his movements. The only time it's ever still is in moments like this one during the Quidditch match, when Harry stays put too. Later, in that same scene, the camera holds for a moment to capture what's chasing Harry. It's what we want to see as the viewer. The best way to characterize the cinematography in this film is that it's meant solely for the audience. Oftentimes this means it must battle with the set and float free to give us the most personal view of the action at hand. When you compare that to the first 2 films, it starts to make sense why this is one of the most liked films in the entire canon. It's not that the story is better than any of the later ones. It's just the most up close and personal with its viewpoint. Therefore, it shows us the most vulnerable side of Harry, I argue, we ever see in the series. That's what motion and cinematography offers. So the Prisoner of Azkaban cinematography isn't easy to nail down, I'll admit it. However, I think another Cuaron film that he worked on with longtime collaborator Emmanuel Lubezki may strike the right tone and prove what I'm trying to say here. I want to take a moment to look over the cinematography of Gravity. Most of this movie is shot in a studio with green screen effects everywhere. And it has to be that way because, we're in space. What were Lubezki and Cuaron going to do to elicit that feeling of gravity for the viewer, if not move the camera? See, through the camera, they speak to movement. When Ryan Stone begins to drift into darkness, watch the camera slowly trace her before cutting to a tight shot in more direct perspective. This shot tells us the camera has its own momentum, and the movement is dictated by what's happening at the moment. Those dizzy moments of chaos and tension involve a camera that spirals and flips with no notion of intent. Our view is as weightless as Ryan's, nothing is grounding us in the scene, and the effect is jaw-dropping. There's no stable moment in Gravity. Even during Stone's relative still moments in the escape crafts, the camera moves ever so slightly. It's hard to keep motionless in zero gravity, and the camera reflects that. Watch the top of the screen in this scene. Notice how the frame moves up and down ever so slightly. It still mimics the gravity of the situation. Motion is dictated by the relative emotional state of Dr. Stone and the actual movement dictated by the environment. They're both related. This scene is about Ryan giving up and accepting death. It's the emotional midpoint in the film. It's not till she has her vision and decides to fight for herself that the camera wakes back up from the lullaby. She's moving again, so the camera begins to pick up its pace along with the editing. Finally, when the resolution hits and Stone lands in the water, the camera bowies with the waves. It's not till she crawls onto the ground that the tracking shot turns into a more stable, traditional movement. One can argue this is the first moment in the entire film that the camera feels docked and steady, and for a good reason. See, without even getting into the nitty-gritty details of gravity, we can see the emotional stakes and the character's feelings all through the camera's motion. It's proof that cinematography is crucial to communicating the themes of stories. No one understands that better than Alfonso Cuaron. Alright, that was a lot of talk about how camera movement impacts the themes, but what about the absence of activity? Not every film by Cuaron is continuously on the move. The best example of this comes from his work on Roma, a profoundly personal film connected to his early life in Mexico. The past two examples of spinning yarn that's not hard to grasp onto, right? Basically, the camera is attached to the protagonist because it's one of the best ways directors can communicate with the audience. If we're going to be passive observers in the story, it's better to feel what the main character is feeling, and cinematography is a direct route to that effect. In Roma, Cleo is different than any other Cuaron protagonist. She's practically an audience member too. I don't mean to minimize her role in the film. Her presence gives us weight to every scene and helps us relate to the micro and macro storylines Cuaron is weaving. She's one of the most complex characters he's put on screen. What's surprising is the cinematography is the exact opposite. It's as if Cuaron, as the director of photography, is aiming for this movie to be as personal as possible. Cleo is a character restrained by her position, her pregnancy, and the political circumstances at the time. The camera is meant to reflect that sense of restraint. It holds on moments to let the audience absorb the full range of emotions, and only dollies to fully embody what's happening. To circle back to a point made earlier, all of the motion and long takes in Cuaron's movies does one thing above all else. It manages our perception of time. Editing is the manipulation of time to help a story go faster or slower. The reason Roma holds frames and lets moments sit longer is to give honor to time. After all, it's a personal story partially about Cuaron's own childhood memories. The stillness is real. He's holding on to memories. And in wonders like the last scene in the movie, he wants us to take the time to feel every ounce of emotion present in each scene. That's not to say camera movement keeps us from doing that, only that time functions differently for every character. In Gravity, for instance, time is a ticking clock working against the character, making sense to give less ease to the cinematography. In Roma, time is nostalgic and grounded. Cuaron is doing everything he can as the DP to craft moments that will last. They're paintings meant to summarize moments in one person's life impacted by so many other elements. That's how stillness works in his films. Motion and the lack of movement both matter equally, even if one is far more present in his overall work. There's so much more to say about this director, but unfortunately I can't fit it all in one video. There's his editing style, screenwriting, and even the use of effects and color in his movies. It all serves a purpose. The one thing I want you to take away from this discussion on Alfonso Cuaron is that his films work on so many levels because of his attention to the tiny details. His entire crew helps make every wonder and every frame fill with purpose. He doesn't waste a single moment. That's worth appreciating. As always, I leave you with a clue to the next video, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to take a look at my Patreon for ways to support Dissecting the Director. Oh, and a like on this video goes a long way, and a special thanks to all my subscribers. Until next time, thanks for watching.